Thank you very much, Professor Willemen, for having this interview with us. And my first question is about your talk, your lecture at this conference. And the focus of this talk of yours is on a collection of meditation manuals discovered in Central Asia. Is there anything that they can tell us about the interests or the activities of the monks who lived in these regions?
Well, Central Asia, first of all, let's define it before we can say yes or no. It goes from the west, it goes west from Dunhuang in Gansu province in China, and it goes all the way to what is known as Bactria by the Greeks, Daxia in Chinese, and that's northern part of Afghanistan. This is Central Asia. But this northern part of Afghanistan is part of the Indian cultural area, of the northwestern Indian cultural area. So it's hard to separate the Central Asian meditation and the northwestern Indian meditation. I know the Central Asians, they look at China, they look at India as if there were some foreign exotic places. The Indians look at Central Asia as if it were exotic, and everybody looks at everybody else as sees them as exotic, which is quite normal. But it's Indian Buddhism, basically. And Central Asia is the link between northwestern India and East Asia and China. So there's nothing new which originates. Those are developments which started mostly in northwestern Indian cultural area.
And could you share a little bit then, if this is the link between, if Central Asia is really defined as the link between northwestern India and East Asia, what are some of the common trends or trajectories of thought that you see developing, in these three places as these meditation manuals?
Well, they start in what's today Pakistan and northern Afghanistan, but that is traditionally India. The meditation manuals very often originate in that area. Now, it depends on the period we're talking about. If it's the 1st century, 2nd, 3rd AD, then the usual road is from the Swat Valley, from Ludhiana, right across the mountains to Khotan, basically.
All the way to modern-day Yutian, right? Yes, okay.
But in the 4th century, the road changes, and because after the Kushanas collapsed, the Bactria to Kashgar road and then on to Kucha was more traveled than the other road. So it depends. On those roads, you find the Buddhism which was prevalent in those areas. So I'll be focusing very much on the when and the where. If one should know what time we're talking about and which place we're talking about. If you're not clear about that, how can you talk about relationships and influences and things like that? It's first be concrete and then be philosopher.
Well, for example, then look at the Pure Land text that we've got here, Abhirati, visualization texts, all to do with the Pure Land school that was starting to arise. What period were these in, and anything we can learn from?
BC. The Abhirati and Akshobhya is Eastern Paradise, is east of traditional Jibin, as it is known in Chinese, which is Pakistan today. That's the eastern part of traditional Jibin. And there are the Mahasanghikas, who call themselves Mahayana. And they developed this Buddhas in the 10 directions, each with their own Buddha field. And Abhirati is a special one. But to the west of there, in the western part of traditional Jibin, which is today's Afghanistan, you have mostly Sarvastivadis, not exclusively, but mostly. And they immediately reacted to this idea with an ideal intermediate existence. That's what I mean. That's what happened after death, before you're reborn. Yes. So when you die, you go to an intermediate existence, but the Sarvastivadins, reacting to the Eastern Mahasangikas, said we also have this paradise, and so the Amitabha's paradise is in the West. I place it in Bactria, in the western part of traditional Jibin.
So they place
BC.
it in BC.
We're talking BC.
And this is in a sort of reaction to an earlier cult, earlier school that say we have an Eastern paradise, Akshobhya.
Yes, that started.
But we have an even better intermediate existence.
That's how it started. Yes.
And so we know of this, but how come the Sarvastivadins, developed them? Because to the common academic knowledge, these are specific schools only of Vinaya discipline, and it did not matter whether they were Mahayana or...
Yes, I like the word academic. You know, if you look it up in a dictionary, it means no consequences.
Yes. Okay, that's fair enough.
I hope this discussion is not academic.
No.
So, we know that in that western part of traditional Jibin is older than Kashmir, older than Buddhism in China. It is already mentioned 2 centuries BC. In the Qian Hanshu, the former Han Dynasty record, it's mentioned. So it is older than Buddhism in China. So we know there is traditional Jibin. We know that in that area there are mainly, in Bactria there are mainly Sarvastivadins, but there are also Mahasangikas, there are also Dharmaguptakas, and there are quite a few Pudgalavadins, meaning Vatsiputriyas, Samitiyas. And they also have an intermediate existence, by the way. So when I say Sarvastivadins in Bactria, I mean this is their stronghold,
where they're most concentrated.
But that doesn't mean the others are not there.
So that's true, fair enough.
Just like in Gandhara, that's mostly Mahasangika. And by the way, the Mahasangikas started using the word Mahayana for themselves. In the Ashtasahasrika, it's mentioned for the first time, Mahayana, the word.
Yes, the great vehicle.
The great vehicle.
It starts being used as a terminology.
Yes. We are the great vehicle. That's it.
And so what we're starting to get here is a very, it's not clear at all from a historical perspective, but I seem to get this impression that from these meditation manuals, we start to see different schools coming up with new ideas that germinate reactions from other different schools. Is that an accurate description of what's going on?
Actually, almost all schools had Abhidharma, especially the Staviravada ones, and their Abhidharma are meditation manuals, basically. It is the Abhidharma which is said to be pronounced by the Buddha in heaven to his mother. That's limited to one so-called orthodox Sarvastivada group in Kashmir mainly, and to the Theravadins in the Deep South. All other schools never had a Buddha Bhashta, never had an Abhidharma spoken by the Buddha. If it's spoken by the Buddha, it doesn't have meditation manuals. You just take it and that's it. But all other schools, and even most of the Sarvastivadins, had meditation manuals, how to become an arhat, and that's it's about the Dharma, so it can be called Abhidharma, and you can put it in a Pitaka. It is using the Dharma and its elements, the Dharmas, to outline a way to become arhat. So, but many teachers had different ideas. All had partly the same ideas, but also they had other ideas. But when coming back to the Vinaya, this is a typically Indian thing, you know. So in India, if you have a difference, a dispute about the rule for monks and nuns, then you have a schism. But yes, that's true. The first schism is between the Mustavidas and the Mahasangikas, and I think this schism is has results even to our day today, and is much more important than the Mahayana Hinayana thing.
So this schism is much more important than any distinction made between so-called Hinayana, Mahayana.
Yes, because the two groups that started out, the two families, they started using each other's good ideas. So the Mahasangikas had their ideas about wisdom and emptiness, and Abhirati and typically Mahasangika ideas, and the others took what they thought was useful. So in the end, they also became Mahayana, you know. So you have Staviravara Mahayana, and everybody was called Mahayana in the end. Yes. The word Mahayana, by the way, is much more frequent than the word Hinayana.
Yes.
So that would explain that.
And so all these schools, in a sense, became Mahayana because they took all each other's ideas.
They took over each other's good ideas, yes.
So all these schools united as one, thanks to their...
Well, a school is defined by its Vinaya, so the Tantric people used Mula Sarvastivada Vinaya, used Sarvastivada Vinaya. It's only their yoga was different from other yogas, but their Vinaya was still Sarvastivadas. You could call them Sarvastivada monks in Nalanda, for instance.
United, and obviously the Vajrayana ideals, they're also part of the Mahayana family in a sense, to be.
At that moment, there was hardly any distinction between Mahayana and Hinayana. So you had the Hinayanists, if I can call them that, like Asanga in his Yogacara, like the Pure Land. They are started out as Sarvastivada groups, borrowing good ideas from the competition. So they themselves became Mahayana people. And everybody was could be called Mahayana from a certain time on.
I feel like we're on a great detective trail of different ideas and schools, learning from each other.
We're having fun.
Yes.
Yes. No, the first schism should be about Vinaya, or there is no schism. So Mahasangika Stavira, this first schism is about Vinaya. But I guess if you in the Sangha, if you have a discussion and many different views, and monks, we're talking about India here, if you have different, they are verbally very strong. And if you see all those discussions about different ideas in the Sangha, Vinaya dispute might arise too. Of course, in those days, I'm probably talking about the late 4th century BC. In those days, there was no writing for religious literature. So all we have is this logical hypothesis, and and we can see what happened later. What the Mahasangikas, all of their schools stand for, and what the others stand for. I think the Staviras, who are the leaders in the Sangha, added a few small rules to the Vinaya, because they wanted to keep the Sangha together. They saw all those disputes. And the majority was didn't agree. So you have a Vinaya, a schism, all right.
Schism of the
but
code.
Originally it was because of the discussions which also led to a Vinaya dispute. That's what I think happened. Now, one group, the Mahasangikas, the majority, they call them Mahasangika. They are Mahayana. Their master was Mahakatyayana. They see everything big. And the others, the Staviras, they were the minority in those days. They are also, I think, more traditional. They base their explanations on the Four Noble Truths, and the Mahasangikas on the 6 Paramitas and all that. The importance of this first schism is that they borrowed each other's good meditative ideas. For example, Buddha Nusmrti Nyan Pho, meditating about Buddha, seeing Buddha in the 10 directions. It's a Mahasangika idea. They did not want to limit the Buddha to one world and one existence, but he also, everywhere he is.
Yes.
And the others thought, well, that's a good idea. And they also used that, and they came up with their intermediate existence as a paradise after death, before being the Buddha. Amitabha can teach you there. So this borrowing, this acting and reacting, and one calling themselves Mahayana, that's Mahasangika, so the others using their ideas also became Mahayana. So you come up with a mixed form of Buddhism, which everybody is calling Mahayana. And that's today why Pure Land is called Mahayana, why Yogacara, that is so popular with philosophers, is Mahayana, but it's actually a Sarvastivada Gandharan development, taking in some emptiness from Nagarjuna, which is Mahasangika. So this action-reaction is much more important, and it continues. Not the Hinayana Mahayana thing. That's let's say a result of this first schism.
And so, in conclusion, what happened to these meditation manuals?
Well, actually, most of the schools have meditation manuals. If you see a Shastra, that means teaching. They're teaching how to meditate, how to advance mentally. If you see an Upadesha, that's the Mahasangika thing, that means the same thing. It's an explanation. They explain. If you see an Abhidharma, which is the word of the Buddha in heaven to his mother, that means they are establishing a new orthodoxy, and that is they don't have the meditation manual tradition. If they had it, they're establishing it again as some kind of Abhidharma text, changing it and rewriting it. But all other schools had meditation manuals, different emphasis. Even within one school, different teachers could emphasize other things, and a disciple would go from one teacher, let's say in Bactria, and his meditation method would not be appropriate. He wouldn't like it, so he could go to the next teacher, who would put another emphasis, put the stress on something, on another exercise. Didn't like it, could go to another one, but the Vinaya would not change. And some basic ideas would not change, but some teachers would use good ideas of the competition. And so ultimately all became Mahayana, Mahasangika kind of looking teachers. And
all is one in Mahayana. Everyone became one. Most of them.
Everybody is called Mahayana. Even the Hinayanists call themselves Mahayana. So you can, everybody will say Sarvastivada is Hinayana, not Mahayana, but Pure Land comes from their circles. Asanga was a Mahishasika monk who continues the Gandharan Yogacara tradition of the Sarvastivadins. So you see, and he's Mahayana without any doubt. So they're just using each other's ideas. And this is a much more powerful force in the development of things than this Mahayana. I came to the idea because when I see so many different explanations Mahayana about social revolutions and lay people and all those things, when I see so many different explanations, my conclusion is there's something wrong. Because if it is simple, if it is clear, you don't need a confused explanation. So I started looking, mainly using Chinese material actually, because the material in the northwest of India is mostly preserved in Chinese versions, and it goes via Central Asia to East Asia where it's translated. So those ideas basically mostly come from doing that, because Sanskrit Indian Prakrit material in the northwest is not that many. In Sanskrit, quite a few. But you have this vast literature in Chinese, for instance. I tell my Chinese friends also, now you got so much from India. It's time to give back, because they forgot about it. You have it, you could give it back. And I tell my Indian friends, learn Chinese because they keep your culture. I don't know whether I'm successful or not.
So, thank you very much, Professor.